All right, we're live and recording. Nico, how you doing, man? Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a really long time. I'm doing great, man. Super happy to be on the show. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming back on my show. I've been from time to time. I've been, listening. I mean, I haven't had much time, but listening to your regular talks or chats with Ben Perrin, BTC sessions. So it's pretty cool. You guys are like, recapitulating everything that's been going on. It's pretty cool summaries you guys are giving. Yeah. So yeah, so I thought, Nico, so first of all, for people who might not know who you are, I mean, you're pretty well known in the space. You're the host of the Simply Bitcoin TV show and podcast. And you're also, what kind of position do you have at Swan?
So I'm the director of content strategy. Essentially, I run their YouTube, I run their Rumble, any type of video related content. I probably have my hands on it some way or the other. And just kind of figure out, what type of content do we post on the Swan channel to, number one, grow the channel, and number two, to really get orange pill people to win the race to avoid the war, so to speak, like Corey wrote that piece. Um, so yeah, that's my role at Swan. It's awesome. Really, really enjoy it. Have a great team that I work with that make incredible content and whatnot. So yeah, that's my role.
Awesome. Yeah, and you guys have been watching this a little bit, the educational series moderated by Natalie Brunel. Did you have a hand in that, or did you co-organize or whatever, co-create it a little bit, or did you have some input on that on
Yeah,
that?
so the Welcome to Bitcoin course, no, I really have to give credit to Nick and Brady and Brandon. They've really been pushing that forward. That, of course, and Natalie, she's incredibly talented. They've really been pushing that initiative forward. Of course, I did a lot of the packaging, so the title, the thumbnail, and all that stuff. But I'm glad that you liked it. It was
Yeah.
really, really well received. So I'm really glad to have played a small part in the release of that, specifically on YouTube and on Rumble. But yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's very succinct, comprehensive at the same time, and very, covers all the topics, all the like the fallacies of thinking, and it's just great. So, Nico, yeah, what I wanted to to get your get me a little bit up to date. Like, what is your view of the things going on around like globally? Like with, of course, rooted in Bitcoin, with the legislation you're pushing for CBDCs connecting to, censorship and digital ID and the things that had been going on, in Canada, where I mean, people were like, the bank accounts were frozen. And do you see like do you think that we are, as a Bitcoin community or in Bitcoin space, evolving fast enough um, while all these things are going on?
Um, are we evolving fast enough to keep up with the monetary demons? I think so. I think that the question is, are we going to win the adoption race before they roll these things out? We know that they're unpopular. We know that people, if they're informed, uh they're like, why do I need a CBDC? So it's really our job to wake enough people up to this reality. I'm very optimistic about the global South, Latin America, just because I see that they, out of incentive, right? Like if your fiat currency is broken, you seek an alternative out of necessity. And we've seen a lot of adoption in stable coins in the global South. People are just they're seeking refuge. A small percentage of that is Bitcoin. Our job as Bitcoiners to really wake people up to saying, hey, look, you're only going to find financial sovereignty in Bitcoin. But they're moving full steam ahead. Christine Lagarde, she's making videos. The European Central Bank, I think it was a couple of days ago, released a picture saying, we respect your privacy.
Oh yeah.
Here in the United States, they are here in the United States, they are not only attacking the industry, from my point of view, I think they're attacking the right to self-custody, to be honest with you. They're trying in the DOJ conference that they had in regards to Binance last week, the amount of times that they mentioned terrorism and crypto in the same press conference, I was just like starstruck because
But on the
essentially,
other hand, it's a déjà vu. It's like we've seen this before, right? I mean,
yeah, but I don't think that we've seen this before to this escalation. Like,
really, like a
and the
frontal.
amount,
Like, do you see that as a frontal attack to like self custody? I mean,
inevitably, yes, I really believe that. I think that that's their ultimate end goal. Elizabeth Warren in a Senate Banking Committee, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, she said the quiet part out loud. She said that uh, you know, people are using ever more sophisticated means to skirt around money laundering laws, like taking self custody. So she's like trying to essentially, like on a psychological level, she's trying to connect self custody with crime. And then that's why the DOJ press conference was so striking, because they were trying to connect terrorism with Bitcoin. And the issue isn't with Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners is like, that's a lie. The issue is with the uninformed, right? If you are uninformed and you still consume legacy corporate media, you don't consume independent media, you don't do your own research, you're all of a sudden you're going to start connecting the dots. I'll give you an example. A couple days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, I had the privilege to be invited to this event in South Carolina where Jack Dorsey, Luke Dash Jr., Bitcoin Mechanic revealed Ocean, which is quote unquote the first decentralized mining pool. And it was great to be able to witness it firsthand. But Jack Dorsey went out to tweet something about in relation to the pool. And I kid you not, I'm not joking. The day after, the BBC and a bunch of other legacy media outlets said that Bitcoin mining uses more water on a daily basis than entire Olympic sized swimming pools. So
unbelievable.
they used the word pool in their propaganda attack. And do you think that's a coincidence? The day after that
Of
announcement was
course not.
made? That's
It's
not a
ridiculous.
coincidence,
No.
right? So yeah, we are in the middle. We are in the midst of this information narrative trench warfare, where governments are trying to convince the public. Bitcoiners are on the side of truth. So all we need to do is just expose the lies, misrepresentations, and hypocrisy. And hopefully we do that fast enough and quick enough where we wake up enough of the population where, let's say in the US, you have 5 to 10% of the population that are Bitcoiners, or anywhere around the world. Good luck trying to pass anti-Bitcoin legislation. Like, it's not going to be possible for the politicians. So they're really in a race against time.
Yeah, that's why I put the semi-title of this show like "Speed of Hyperbitcoinization." I mean, it sounds a little bit like, like a little bit superficial, but that's exactly the insight I wanted from you, like, or your perspective. Um, hmm. Well, I'm really concerned, what's going on, in the European Union and in the States. I mean, it's a global, these are global initiatives, and while you're talking, about terrorism, it's like how many trillions of dollars, are being or have been laundered through the fiat central banking, monetary, whatever banking system every year, and people have no fucking notion, like what real terrorism means, actually. Would it be child trafficking or drug trafficking, weapons? Um, I mean, it goes to the fiat central banking system. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah,
my.
no, and like Senator Cynthia Lummis, the Bitcoin senator from Wyoming, she released a graphic during the Senate Banking Committee where she essentially said the quiet part out loud. She said that essentially 99% of illicit finance is conducted through the traditional financial system. No, it's more than 99%. It was like 99.67%. Like it's like an astronomically high number. And only a small fraction is used done with crypto and quote unquote Bitcoin. But the amount of emphasis that they're putting on Bitcoin and crypto tells me that they're not really concerned about the money laundering. Like when a government is telling me, like when the US government is telling me, and they're is like, the United States is a country of laws. Oh, really? You follow them? Like, are you politician? You have the cleanest like everything that's been going on the last 2 or 3 years, right? Whatever political side you're on, it doesn't matter, right? The leading political opponent of the leading political opponent of Joe Biden, who's currently president, is being charged with crimes, right? So the US has gone down this path, right? And not to mention all the money that's being sent to Ukraine, not to mention whether it's the war on terrorism, the Patriot Act. You could say that there's current dealings, if you were to believe them or not, coming out of the current president that are somewhat, questionable. And of course, for some reason, it's rules for Lee and not for me. So the political class, the political elite, the uniparty, the administrative state in the United States is playing by a different set of rules than the rest of us have to play by. So when they have this press conference and they grandstand and they tell us the United States is it's a country of law and order, and CZ, he broke the law, and crypto is connected to terrorism and he facilitated terrorism. Like, I'm sorry, I don't like, if it was 20 years ago, I would have believed it. Maybe if it was 10 years ago, I would have believed it. But after what we've lived through as a country, as the world, with the pandemic and everything that happened over the last 2 or 3 years, forgive me if I don't like, I'm like, who are you to tell me that? You aren't necessarily the most honest person I've ever seen. This is the same. And Janet Yellen was part of that press conference. She was saying that the US was going to have no inflation, even though we printed a record amount of money. Like, I'm sorry, like, and I don't want to name all the other things because they're outside of the Overton window, but it's just like there's been so many things and so many events that have happened over the last couple of years that I'm just like, who, like, you guys are the biggest cartel mafia I've ever seen. Like, it's insane. Who are you to lecture
Yeah.
me or lecture the world on what is right and what is wrong if you guys can't even follow those laws yourselves?
Yeah.
And not only that, you aren't even held accountable for those
Exactly.
same laws.
Yeah.
So it's just, the system is clearly breaking. I think fiat is responsible for all this. I think that the more they print, and the acceleration of the printing is really going to have um, uh, downstream effects down the line, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. And whatever we can imagine, whatever we know, the reality is actually much worse than, we can actually, I mean, the two of us are a lot, so many people, within the Bitcoin community and then even beyond they comprehend this, everything that you've been saying, about like how fucking systemically corrupt and fraudulent and criminal and beyond criminal this whole system is. But to be honest with you, I mean, sometimes I have empathy with my fellow human beings because it's not easy to, first of all, to be open-minded, because your whole worldview would just shatter, break down like a house of cards. And it's worse. It's like beyond imagination. It's worse than that. That's why I was saying, like the trillions and trillions that been missing. I mean, Catherine Awesome Fitz had been, preaching about this. I mean, she's an insider. She's a whistleblower. And like how many, like 20, 21, that's just the official number. It's been just siphoned off. I mean, when was the last audit of the Pentagon? Or
No,
it's
they
again
failed.
missing.
They failed. It was worse. They failed like 6 audits, dude. Like it's so absurd. Like it's
It's
so
it's a fucking
absurd.
clown show, man. I mean, look at Pelosi. I mean, how can people, politicians like Pelosi, who have like what is it? Yearly salary of what? What is it? 200,000? I don't care, but get a total net volume of wealth in the area of whatever, 150, $200 million. How do you get that? And of course they're not going to advocate for laws that clean up this whole fraud, and insider trading. But that's just an example. I'm just saying, it's
Yeah, and there's so many examples of that. There's so many examples of this just like blatant in your face theft. Like,
yeah.
because it's theft. Like that's what it is.
And the election
Um
was stolen. Come on, let's just articulate it. Come on, man. I mean, it's a fucking fraud. It was stolen, and the guy is not even a legitimate president. I mean, the election was stolen. I mean, and most probably, and definitely, it's not the first time. Because there are different ways to manipulate or to defraud the whole election system, right? But anyway,
yeah,
I'm gonna rant on
like I
that.
said, outside of the topic of the Overton window, but I'll say one comment about that. And what I'll say is um it was the first time in American history where this never happened before. They didn't finish the counting the same day, essentially. And they stopped the counting, late into the night. I've never seen that before. And that will be my comment in regards
Okay,
to what you said.
that's good. That's good. Good enough. So Nico, what do you think about this whole, maybe people are like, I don't know, like I'm hoping they're not selling hopium. Maybe they're like really credible people in the space and like, once spot PTFs are formally, allowed into the market, probably simultaneously when it's going to be like whenever in January, the price is gonna, pump because of, yeah, I mean, I understand logically it would make sense because there's a lot of liquidity and demand, institutional demand, and the career risk is gone and from a lot, maybe even pension funds. I mean, do you see that a chain reaction going and really pushing the price? Let's just say really pessimistically to 100,000, 200,000, which is realistic. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, is it just too overhyped?
Yeah. So what's my take on the potential outcome of the ETF? Look, I was extremely disappointed by Bitcoin's price performance last halving. I think a lot of us were. I think a lot of us were expecting $100,000 Bitcoin. I think the reason that we didn't get to that point is because of rehypothecation from exchanges like FTX that were literally selling. They weren't selling real Bitcoin. They were literally selling paper Bitcoin essentially.
Mm.
And then the most important factor, which I don't hear a lot of people talk about, is the China ban. So essentially, if you take a look at the Bitcoin hash rate and the Bitcoin price, you will see a direct correlation between when the price fell the first time, the first time we reached the peak, we fell, the hash rate fell before that. And essentially, the hash rate fell before that because that's when China made it illegal to mine Bitcoin mining within their borders. Now, still, it's estimated that between 15% of the hash rate is still located in China. So the incentives are still winning. And the hash rate today is 9 times higher than before the China ban happened. But that happened right in between the middle of the last bull market. And I believe that played a major role in taking the momentum out of the price action because essentially all those miners needed to sell a lot of Bitcoin in order to relocate to more favorable jurisdictions overseas. That being said, the theory, the blind spot, this cycle is the theory of diminishing returns. Now, it kind of makes sense if if you're logical about it. The law of big numbers plays in. It's a lot harder for Bitcoin to get from 100,000 to 200,000 than it was for Bitcoin to get from $100 to $1,000, right? And just in numerical terms. So that's the theory now. So what I'm seeing, what I'm sensing in the community, whether it's YouTube and Twitter and whatever, is that the price predictions and the anticipation of where Bitcoin can go is a lot lower, right? A lot of people are like, I'd be happy with $100,000, if that. I'd be happy with $120,000. Now, I'd be honest with you, that would really bum me out if that was the case. But if we're to learn from the last cycles, Bitcoin tends to do the exact opposite of what people expect it to do. So you could see a lot of people selling at 100K because they're thinking, okay, we're reaching the top, and then this thing blow up to $500,000 in the next cycle. I think we don't know. I think the ETF is extremely bullish to the Bitcoin price because of the amount of money that would be flowing in.
How much money are we talking about? Like, how many hundreds of
I
billions or
Look, I'm not a macro guy, I'm a geopolitics guy, but
Mhm.
I can tell you that, BlackRock alone has, I think last time I checked, $8.9 trillion assets under management.
Mhm.
Fidelity, it has trillions of dollars as well. Franklin, like all these massive asset managers have trillions and trillions of dollars. If just a small percentage of that went into Bitcoin, I think, it would be a game changer. But there's another component as well, which is that Michael Saylor and Nayib Bukele on the nation state level are being vindicated right now. Michael Saylor's average price is about $30,292. That means that his investment, with all the shit he got for it, because he got a ton of shit, he has been vindicated. He was right. He was really, really right. He was beyond right. And now all of a sudden, when the next cycle peak happens, if you're a public company, if you're a country, and you're looking at what Nayib Bukele is doing, and you're looking at what Michael Saylor is doing, you're saying, wow, his strategy was superior. He holding Bitcoin on my balance sheet is actually a much better idea than holding fiat. Michael Saylor says it best. He's like, holding fiat is like holding a melting ice cube. And I think that because these are public companies and they have to adhere to their shareholders, I think that there's going to be mounting pressure for these public companies to put at least a small percentage of their treasury in Bitcoin. Like Apple and all these companies, they're holding so much cash,
Yeah, that's what really intrigues me. I mean,
and it's
so
melting.
it's
It's
melting.
melting,
So
you
what is
know?
there some kind of other forces behind that? That's just, I mean, that it's just so illogical what that they're not doing it. I mean, why is it? What's the incentive? What's the
Um, so like what's the incentive?
yeah, to hold so much cash? I mean,
I think that, it's pretty straightforward. I think that essentially, there's obviously there is politically motivated uh there is politically motivated um I think that some of it could be politically motivated. Like the current administration, the Biden administration has made it very, very clear that they are just not fans of the industry. They really, if they had the ability, they would have rolled out a central bank digital currency by now. They just don't have the support in Congress. Um, And I think that they're in a pickle right now. They're in a kind of like this catch 22. But I think as a whole, like if you kind of zoom out, I think that the world is reaching this like level of peak fiat, peak centralization. And essentially, because fiat has broken the world to such an extent, the main benefactors of fiat, right, which is this government, politicians, cantillionaires, they're incentivized to censor, to steal, to lie, to manipulate, to misrepresent information as much as humanly possible in order to keep their control on the truth and their narrative control on the truth, because that's the only way they can keep this going. Because as soon as people start to ask the question, what is money? Why is my money stealing from me? Why am I being forced to use a money that is designed to lose purchasing power? I already pay my taxes. I never agreed to this. I think that they don't have a really good response to that. And the reason I'm saying that is because they've completely ignored like Elizabeth Warren or any of the papers that were written by the Treasury or the White House. They're essentially making the case that people are seeking, even Jerome Powell, I think, said this, like people are seeking Bitcoin because they want a more efficient means of payment. We have very efficient means of payment in the US. We have Cash App, we have Zelle, we have PayPal. People aren't seeking a more efficient means of payment. People are seeking to use money that doesn't steal from them.
Yeah.
And they've ignored that completely,
Mhm.
which tells me that they just don't have a good answer to that
Yeah.
response, right?
Didn't Powell, even in a hearing or some kind of congressional whatever hearing, like whether intentional or not, I mean, say, it is an alternative store of value to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is sort of a store of value. Didn't he say something like that, or am I confusing something? Maybe another statement. Anyway, but I thought he said it, that it's sort of a alternative store of value. Some kind of hearing. But okay, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so Powell, to be honest with you, he's not that like he hasn't been like he hasn't been he hasn't been that adversarial compared to, let's say, he hasn't been that adversarial compared to someone like Janet Yellen. Um, but that's still not to say that uh, he's a fan, because at the end of the day, I think that if you're the head of a central bank, Bitcoin is the death of you, because it questions the very system of central banking. Now,
So
why do you think that they attacked Nayib Bukele so much? Look at what they did to Javier Milei. They tried to throw anything and everything at that guy. He's a far right. He's a libertarian. He's not a
mm,
fascist.
mm.
He's not an ultra conservative, whatever. He's a libertarian, right? And they're calling him a far right extremist. You know who they
Yeah.
also call the far right extremist? Nayib
Mm.
Bukele.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Nayib Bukele and Javier Milei in Argentina, they are threats to the very idea of central banking. And that is a big effing problem. And that is so dangerous, because once they prove, and I don't know about Javier, it's too early,
To be
but
honest, yeah, I'm not sure about Pavia. I mean, I love his, Austrian economics, libertarian, rants, and I mean, it's beautiful. But the things that he's done, I mean, you can call it controversial. And then a meeting with Bill Clinton, this is, I
that
mean,
was weird, right? That was
it's
super
really
weird.
weird. And
It's
then,
really weird.
becoming a Zionist. And I mean, I'm really, really straightforward with you. I mean, this is, I'm totally anti-nation, anti-religious, anti-whatever, but I'm pro, human. So I don't know. Is it being blackmailed? Is it being threatened? I don't know. Or is it being put? Are there any oligarchs that there are actually some oligarchs that have been funding him? But you should listen to Whitney Webb's one of the latest interviews. I can send it to you. She goes pretty deep into the background of Javier Milei. But I still like his as you said, he's libertarian, also economic, like freedom and fuck the socialists and all of that. But something doesn't make sense. I mean, with Bukele, I had a more even, emotionally, viscerally, a more positive feeling. But yeah, that's the way it is. It's yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, it's I mean, like, look, like if we're being honest and sincere, like it's like the issue is essentially that this is a lot of American politics. A lot of American politics, the pendulum swings very hard. So like it either swings to the left and then it swings back to the right as a reaction, and then it kind of swings back like and forth. And like that's been the history of Latin America for a very, very long time. That's why what Nayib Bukele did was so extraordinary. I think it's too early to tell with Javier. Let's see. Like, I know that one of the first things that he said is that he still has every intention to end the central bank. I could tell you that is definitely a step in the right direction. Not so much if he's going to allow that, but in politics, there's this concept of the Overton window, which is the acceptable window of discussion, right? And if you talk about ending the central bank in the United States, it would be outside of the Overton window, except for Bitcoiners and hardcore libertarians. But most people would be like, nah, that's extreme. But the fact that you had a president elected to a country, a G20 country, Argentina is a big country, it's like 45 million people. And he's saying, let's end the central bank. And he's taking a chainsaw and cutting it into pieces. And that was accepted by the majority of the population. That is a step in the right direction for our
Definitely.
cause.
That means something.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So even if he doesn't live up, because it's very hard, he must have a lot of pressure. I don't know what his net worth is, but politicians that tend to be poor when they get into office, they use the office to enrich themselves. Mm-hmm. Is he going to fall into that trap? Is he going to be noble? Is he going to be honorable? Is he going to have ethics and morals and all that stuff? I don't know. I have no idea. But political discourse is important, and he moved that right to a really, really good side for us Bitcoiners. And we need all the help we can get. Right. We have one beachfront, the country of El Salvador, the shining country on a hill. Now we need more countries falling like dominoes, adopting Bitcoin, making Bitcoin legal tender.
Yeah.
And the more countries do that, the better.
I've had discussions like what's the critical number, the critical mass of countries, especially like in Africa or Latin America, that just need it, to unleash this this power, of hyperbitcoinization. Maybe it's just really 3, 4, 5 countries, and then the competitive pressure comes, and then everybody's like, okay, we need to. There's something we need to change, I mean, just coming maybe even from the grassroots level, from the people themselves, like these people are making something right in El Salvador or hopefully, in Argentina soon. And right. So maybe it's going to become really a sudden process, as Parker Lewis would call it. But we'll see, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I don't know when, I don't know like what the critical mass is. I think that we're living through very turbulent times in history. I think we're living through two phenomenons that are happening simultaneously, kind of overlapping each other. The internet started the fire, and it really disintermediated information and you see this with social media. So the ability for governments to control narratives is greatly diminished once individuals are able to talk freely directly with each other. That's why they're attacking Elon with Twitter. Look at what me and you are doing right now. We're talking, in our homes with microphones, cameras, and we're broadcasting and people are listening to this. That didn't exist 20 years ago. You had to go through the TV stations. You had to go through the newspapers. They've been disintermediated. And the younger generations, they only get their information from these sources. And governments, it's very difficult for them to co-opt every single one of these sources, and it becomes very difficult for them. That's why they're reacting like, we're going to censor the internet, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And that's happening, right? So the disintermediation of information. And then overlapping that is the disintermediation of money, right? Which is like now all of a sudden the governments are dealing with two problems. Like, holy, we can't no longer control the narrative. Now people have a choice between using our money and using their money, and they're just like, holy cow, what is happening? And it's causing chaos. Like, they don't know what to do. In my opinion, they're scared because the information thing is one thing, but once people start opting out of their money, that is their direct source of power. That is how they pay the men with guns.
It goes to the roots. Yeah.
So that scares them. And I think that eventually they're gonna have, and you've seen this, they're gonna start saying the quiet part out loud, which is, we don't want you to take self-custody. We don't want you to use your own money. We want you to use our money. And I don't know how I don't know how they plan to explain that. I don't know how they're going to convince people to go along with that, but it's a very, very big problem that they have. Because I think ultimately what Bitcoin does is, and if the world moves to a sound money standard, is that essentially it completely changes the power dynamics between individuals and the nation state. All of a sudden, governments, if people adopt Bitcoin, there's a Bitcoin standard, governments are no longer going to be able to pay for things they could no longer afford through with the hidden tax of inflation. If they want to pay for something, they're going to have to do it via direct taxation or wealth confiscation or direct wealth confiscation.
Yeah,
and that becomes very, very difficult to do, especially on a massive scale. And I think over the long term, that changes the relationship between the individual and the government and the state. And the sovereign individual laid this out. Like they predicted this in the 90s, right? And I think we're witnessing their theory. They didn't get everything right, but we're witnessing their theory play out in slow motion.
Yeah. So the system wants to restrict or control the flow of information, the fundamental basis of information, which is let's just call it the internet. I mean, but they can't do that. I mean, is the internet, I mean, decentralized enough, or it's not decentralized, but is it partitioned enough that that it is preventable, or do we have, is that our obligation, or is that our mission to with Nostr and other platforms to to seek out and develop other decentralized platforms, like totally like detached from the system?
So I'm a big fan of Start9. And Start9 is, they started as a Bitcoin node, and they became essentially their products. And I run a Start9 Server Pure Pro at my house, just a top of the line product. And essentially it's a server, right? So I run my Bitcoin node on it. It's a full computer, but it also allows me to download other apps that make it that, let's say you had that same app running at home on your computer or on your server. And Start9 makes it super easy for you to do this. We can have peer-to-peer communications, file sharing, potentially video conferencing. Because essentially how the internet works now, even services like Signal that are big supporters of free speech and encrypted messages, and supposedly they don't want people to snoop into your conversations. Even still, when let's say me and you, let's just use Zoom for example, or we're using now. Me and you aren't communicating directly. I'm communicating to Zoom servers, and the Zoom servers are communicating to you, and then you are communicating to the Zoom servers, and the Zoom servers are communicating to me. So the internet right now isn't peer-to-peer. Most services on the internet that we use, it's Twitter, Zoom, YouTube, Rumble, anything, you name it, they're not peer-to-peer.
Right.
They're all being hosted on servers. I think the future is sovereign computing, where you're running your own server. You are hosting your own data, right? And in the process of doing that, instead of everyone going through this single choke point that governments can and have in the past, used for their political means, imagine if everyone is just communicating directly peer to peer, which is essentially how Bitcoin works, really, especially if you run your own node. But imagine if data worked that way. Imagine if messaging worked that way. I think it would be better. Now, to go back to your original question, which is the internet decentralized? No, at the end of the day, internet is just a bunch of cables that go under the sea. They go into buildings, and because of that, governments can, they can, cut the wire, which they have in the past during protests and all that
Right.
stuff. They've pulled down services. But I think that the more and more people get informed, and the more and more people realize, like, is the government really by the people for the people, or is the government for the government by the government? I think more and more people are going to have problems against that. And I think as the population ages, more and more of those people are going to be in positions of power, right? In positions of influence. I think as Bitcoin's market cap grows and Bitcoiners as a whole become wealthier, they will become more influential. They'll be able to affect certain certain politics, and they'll be able to affect and influence society in a certain way to free up that society. But I think that this is an arms race. It's a continued arms race all the time, between the forces of centralization versus the forces of decentralization.
Yeah, this is exactly, what you're saying is alludes to that first question I asked, or one of the first questions, like, are we fast enough? Is that because we are in a race, we're in an arms race. So are we going to make it? Because I see so much, I mean, I don't, I'm very optimistic and realistic, but I'm just, I'm trying to be, realistic, seeing all the pressures mounting up, the criminal entities, the central banking system, the EU, European Union. I mean, that's sometimes It's concerning. It's concerning. You know, um, but we're making progress. I mean, look at all the developments that you just mentioned, Start 9 Lab, whatever, and then Paulo Arudino, what's his platform? Keat, is that Keat or something like that? The peer-to-peer platform. So there are
Exactly.
things going on, definitely things going on, but I'm just asking myself sometimes, is that enough? Are we fast enough? How much more resources, brains, time, do we have enough time for that? Which, leads me again to the other part, because I don't want to hold you up too much. Um, to the other part of our discussion, which I wanted to initiate, is I know there's a topic. I don't know whether you've had time to research it a little bit, but as the magnetic field of the Earth has been diminishing since the 1850s, and provably in the last decades, like every year by 5%. And there are so many studies coming out, of course, either not really mainstream or suppressed or whatever, astrophysicists, geophysicists, and all of that. So I think a realistic scenario which could happen within the next 20, 30 years, and that's the best case scenario, by the way, because I think these Earth disaster cycles, there's different layers, different phases of Earth disaster cycles. The smallest one is between 150 and 200 years, Carrington event. So is that something that occupies your mind a little bit? Because what we're talking about is, once the communication information systems are destroyed or somehow damaged, satellites, grid off, satellites destroyed. I mean, Bitcoin, I think, is the least worry that we're going to have. We're going to have, I think we'll need to start from scratch and build up a civilization, and then hopefully, plan or pre-plan a reset of of the Bitcoin blockchain and the whole infrastructure. Do you know where I'm going with this, or is that for you a reasonable, realistic scenario and concern that you have, or do you think most Bitcoiners, or 99% of the Bitcoiners, really deny or just ignore it, the
Yeah, I
reality.
mean, so the Carrington event was a big deal. It was, it happened, I think, in the mid 1800s. Essentially, it was a solar, if my memory serves me correctly, it was a solar storm that released enough electromagnetic radiation that it just fried the electrical systems on Earth, right? And essentially, yeah, like I mean, if there that's completely out of our control, if there's another solar storm and it does the same thing, and it will fry a lot of the electrical components once again. Um, but I think that I think that people underestimate the ability for humanity to innovate. There's been so many natural disasters, throughout history that have just been horrific. And I think that we've learned from every single one of them. And I think that there's, just because something gets fried, just because some electrical components gets fried, I'm sure that there is one crazy Bitcoin psychopath that is running a Bitcoin node deep down in an underground bunker that is, going to be immune from, solar winds and solar storms, so to speak. So as long as there's, a couple Bitcoin nodes left, I think we'll be fine. I think it, for the mining, for all the miners, throughout the world, that's going to create a tough situation. But I also think that, like, regardless of Bitcoin, most of our society is just, it's run on, electronics and electricity, and it's run on via the internet. And, I work on my laptop almost on a daily basis. I work at a both Simply Bitcoin and Swan are remote companies. So, and that's just me. Imagine the entire world, so many things are going to go down in that sense. So I think in that situation, like the best course of action is I hope you have a lot of food and I hope you have a lot of guns because
Yeah,
I think
this is
it'll
what I'm
boil
saying. Yeah,
down to,
yeah, we're gonna go to existential modus, I mean,
yeah.
and the thing is, most people, I mean, I don't know, you believe or think that these Earth disaster cycles, they're like, it's like I mean, if it was like a far off thing, like well, 1,000 millions of years away, okay, who cares, But they're like, people, exponentially more intelligent, more knowledgeable than me, who've been researching this and, for decades, and it's overdue. These Earth disasters are overdue, and I just mentioned Carrington, but I'm talking about like a bigger coronal mass ejections, solar shots, micronova. This could start like beginning, realistically in the 2040s and 50s, and I mean, I tried to ask a couple of people, even Adam Beck, but because I know he's one of the calmest, the most rational, logical thinking, like Blockstream satellite. I mean, yeah, but I mean, I just wanted to know: are there any alternative? Is there anything we can prepare for? Are there alternative methods to make transactions still? Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a bunch of, like, you can send a Bitcoin transaction is just text. Like you can send that using ham radio. You can send that using I forget what the exact name of the networks are. Like,
radio mesh network with
yeah,
mesh
mesh,
radio.
exactly, mesh networks.
Mhm.
There's alternative ways to send Bitcoin transactions that's not hardwired into the internet, but most people use the internet to use Bitcoin transactions because that's the most convenient way. So yeah, I mean, it could totally fuck shit up, like 100%. Like if a Carrington event happens today, I think it will be 100 times worse because back in, the mid 1800s, like there was a lot of analog. People, woke
Yeah.
up, they
That,
some of them still used gas
yeah,
to light their homes.
right.
Some, they some of so used papers. The world was very
Jeez, yeah.
analog
We're
back
so
then. But
dependent, man, Nico. We're
yeah,
so dependent, Everything is electronic. And then on top of that, the magnetic field of the Earth, I mean, is literally, I mean, it's like exponentially like decreasing, every year and accelerating. It's like a curvature. It goes down like this, I mean, this is what really worries me. And these are, I mean, these are scientific, provable facts. And we just need, one bad solar storm, solar flares, or micronova, whatever, and we are pretty much. I mean, humanity will exist, and other species too. But to I don't know how much percentage will survive. I mean, when we're talking like the higher orders of the Earth disaster cycles. But I'm really not a doom and gloom. I'm just trying to face reality. Like, okay, how do we prepare? What do we need to individually, as a family, or as a society, as a village, like get together and help one another. And this is why I'm saying, oh God, Bitcoin will become maybe so trivially forgotten because we don't need it anymore. Because we can't transact anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely a possibility, for sure. It's but I think that history has shown that human beings have a tendency to survive and innovate and dig themselves out of horrific situations. So I think if a Carrington event 2.0 happens again, I think it will have dire consequences, but I also don't underestimate the ability of human beings to survive and then thrive.
Definitely. Human ingenuity. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't have no doubts about the human ingenuity and the genius minds out there and the suppressed technologies. I mean, this is my hope that hopefully at that time before, sometime before, all these technologies will be unleashed, which have been compartmentalized, within the military industrial complex, and which could, eventually help us, protect us from all these, natural Earth disaster cycles. Yeah.
100%, 100%. Yeah, man. It's like you saying, like that's the, like that's the catch 22, so to speak, right? It's
Right.
like like I'm extremely optimistic about the future of the human race. I think that, you have, and I know a lot of people dislike him, but um like what Elon is doing with his crusade to go to you know his crusade to land, like move it, take some humans to Mars and whatnot, and thinking from like a perspective of being an interplanetary species. Like, I don't think he's going to see that in his lifetime. I don't think I'm going to see that in my lifetime, to be honest with you. But that type of thinking is real because look, on a long-term basis, the earth will be inhabitable. Like, you will not be able to live here just because of the expansion of the sun,
Right.
right? And that eventually will kill all life on Earth. And the sun is halfway through its life cycle. Eventually, it will die out. Essentially, it will grow very, very big before it does that, and then it'll get very, very small, and then it will become, a brown dwarf. And essentially Earth will either melt away first and then freeze to death, but humans
Yeah.
won't be able to live here, and no life will be able to live here. So I think thinking about how to make Earth an interplanetary species, an interstellar species, is the only way to ensure humanity's survival in the long term. But I think that's all things that are going to happen outside of my lifetime. I'm just
I think
thinking
so.
about the here and
Okay.
now, and the battle of my life is just fighting for Bitcoin and the adoption of Bitcoin, because I think that the adoption of Bitcoin is going to bring out the best in humanity. It's going to bring the new renaissance in humanity. And I think that potentially it could lead to more geniuses like Elon that are going to be thinking about,
Yeah.
more other crazy inventions to further, propel the human race, for the human race to prosper. And through prosperity comes more innovations, more technology, that allows us to, tackle certain problems.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I mean, when it comes to the civilizational evolution and the human evolution and the technological evolution on every level imaginable, that's what I always said. This is what really excites me about Bitcoin because it will give us so much comfort, joy, and more leisure time, and people can finally go after the things that they really want to do passionately, and finally we can, we don't need to work, to exist, to survive. We're going to thrive, as you said, so and I know, the technology is out there. It just needs to be unleashed and or decompartmentalized. And this is what sometimes makes me sad that it's not only material or money or whatever or existential things that have been stolen from us, at least in the last 100 years since the creation of central banks, but actually technological evolution, innovation that's been stolen from us systematically, which is actually here, but we don't have access to it. And this is what really makes me sad. But on the other hand, yeah, I'm totally, optimistic and bullish. So going back to that first question, I mean, even if I just want to say, I mean, even if I could even imagine Bitcoin going, because I don't care about the price, but it's about the purchasing power. Even if it goes like abruptly, like suddenly to millions of dollars. I mean, the thing is, by that time, even if it happens within the next 1 or 2 years, what kind of purchasing power are we talking about? Because do you see hyperinflation at that time? Because officially hyperinflation is 50% upwards, but we have already in certain, services and products or, things, in a way, hyperinflation or monetary, yeah, debasement.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Like it could totally lead to, you just never know. Like that's the reality. Like you never know what uh you never know, the definition of hyperinflation, like how hyperinflation happens is not because the government is printing a crazy amount of money. Hyperinflation happens because there's a mass uh, on a societal level, the population just loses confidence in the currency,
Yeah.
and all at the same time they start to sell it for everything else, and then it just completely devalues.
Hmm.
So I think that the US dollar is the strongest currency of all fiat currencies by far.
Right.
I think it will be one of the last to hyperinflate, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
um, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Maybe I'm completely wrong. All I know is that I put my energy, my time, my work, my money, my wealth, my future into Bitcoin. So, like, I know that whatever is happening in fiat world, I know that I'm okay and that my family's okay and that my future is okay, right? So yeah, like what these are some crazy times. A lot of people buy into the theory of the fourth turning. I myself included, and all I know is that I think Bitcoin is one of the best ways to protect yourself and your future self and your family's future as well.
Awesome. Do you have kids, Nico?
I don't have kids, but I'm expecting a kid. So
Hopefully, yeah. We need more Bitcoin kids. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah,
We
so
have a daughter. Yeah. Hmm.
I should be a father in February, and that should be interesting. So I'm really
Congratulations,
looking
man.
forward to that. Thank you. I
Awesome.
appreciate that.
So happy for you. Well, anyway, Nico, yeah, was amazing talk to you again and get your insights and yeah, do you have any final words or and where can people find you? Is there anything upcoming? I mean, anything publication wise or anything you want to tell my audience?
Yeah. So I mean, just keep tuning into Simply Bitcoin. Swan's dropping some awesome content too. And you can find me around. And thank you so much for the invite and for having me on. I had a great time.
All right, Nico, was great talking to you. See you next time.
Thanks, man.
Hopefully in person. Bye.